Prophecy World Watch with Steven Leblanc. I'm Willie Bremer. Today, Mr. Blanc, I have some more questions for you. Who is Naphtali Bennett?
Naftali Bennett is the new Prime Minister of Israel, Willie. He is the leader of the Yamina Party. He's 49 years of age. He was a high-tech guru in Israel. A lot of people don't realize this, but Israel competes with Silicon Valley here in California in terms of being the most effective high-tech industry in the world. Naftali Bennett was part of that industry. He served under Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for many years, 49 years of age, sold his tech company, and they say he's worth close to $1 billion. Now, he claims to be religious. You will often see him wear a skull cap as if he were an Orthodox Jew. Now, the reality is the religious establishment in Israel, which makes up about a third of the Israeli population. Remember that in Israel, about two-thirds of the population is actually more secular. A third of the population is considered to be religious. He claims to be religious, but the religious parties in Israel think he's a fake, that he's not that religious. They don't like him. As a matter of fact, when he became prime minister, some in the religious community actually made the comment that, God delivered Israel from Pharaoh. In time, God will deliver us, the religious Jews in Israel, from Naftali Bennett. He claims to be very anti-Iranian, and he's concerned about the potential of Iran to develop a nuclear device. And I think he's genuinely anti-Iran, but he isn't this strong religious conservative he makes himself out to be. The conservatives, the religious conservatives in Israel, they want to see Prime Minister Netanyahu as the prime minister because Prime Minister Netanyahu, who is now the opposition leader in Israel, he had a good relationship with the religious community in Israel.
Mr. LeBlanc, the next question. Who is Yair Lapid?
Yeah, Yair Lapid, he is the leader of the Yesh Atid party, former television anchor, considered to be handsome and dynamic. But he is not a religious Jew, that's for sure. The religious Jews do not like him. He is, he's secular in his beliefs. He represents many in Israel who are of the secular stripe. I repeat this again because it's so important to understand the personality of Israel, which is very much divided. About two-thirds of the country is considered to be secular. Now, they may keep Rosh Hashanah as a type of secular holiday, but they aren't religious. They aren't strict Sabbath keepers. And so Yair Lapid represents them. Now, Yair Lapid came together with other leaders in Israel to support Naftali Bennett, and they came together, this cabal of 8 parties in Israel, and they ousted Prime Minister Netanyahu. It's complicated, I know, that's Israeli politics. Yair Lapid will become prime minister in Israel after 2 years. Naftali Bennett is prime minister for the next 2 years. Then Yair Lapid will be the will be the prime minister of Israel. So let's get back to what is taking place in Israel, which is it's very much divided. Benjamin Netanyahu is determined to become prime minister yet again. He thinks the present government, this network of 8 parties in Israel that have come together, that control the country now politically, that they won't last. There's too much division, that Naftali Bennett will eventually have to call another election, and as a result of that next election, Benjamin Netanyahu will become the next prime minister. There have been 4 elections since the year 2019, Willie, so it's a deeply divided nation. Politically, it's extremely unstable. Now, let's get back to the religious element. This is important. This is where prophecy comes into the picture. Let's get the backstory and the most important prophecy we're going to be talking about today. We've talked about it before, is found in the book of Daniel chapter 12, where it talks about the fact that at the time of the end, there's going to be a time of trouble in the world such has never been seen in all the history of the world. So ahead of us is a time of great war, savagery, trouble. We know within that end time context, there's going to be daily sacrifices once again performed on the Temple Mount. Now, the religious element in Israel, the Orthodox Jews, the ultra-Orthodox Jews, they are significant. They're angry because they don't have much say in the present Israeli government because they're not represented, and their champion, Benjamin Netanyahu, is no longer prime minister. So they're determined to see Netanyahu come to the forefront again and become the Israeli prime minister. So we could see another election in 6 to 9 months in Israel. The religious party believes that it is only the state of Israel that has total control over the Temple Mount. We know from a prophecy in the book of Daniel, Daniel 12, we'll go there again, and I'll read from that prophecy. We're told in verse 10 of Daniel 12 that many will be purged, many will be refined, the wicked will be dealt with, and those who have understanding will understand. But then this incredible prophecy in Daniel 12 and verse 11, where it talks about from the time that the daily sacrifice is abolished. Daniel 12, verse 11, Willie. So it's important for everybody who's watching this to write it down. Daniel 12 and verse 11. We know prophetically that Israel will once again offer twice daily sacrifices somewhere on the area of what is called the Temple Mount. So you're going to see in the near future the religious element in Israel, which is the minority in Israel, they will gain greater power and momentum. One thing we know for sure, and this is demographically very interesting, religious Jews have more children than secular Jews. So the Israeli religious Jewish population is growing very quickly because Orthodox, ultra-Orthodox Jews will often have 6, 8, even 10 children. Where secular Jews, they tend to have 1 or 2 children. Obviously, if you have more teenagers who are reaching the age where they can vote, and they are Orthodox or ultra-Orthodox, and they tend to be very loyal, they will vote for a candidate like Netanyahu, who is supported by the religious right. The point of all this is that we watch prophetically and at the world news level to see Israel eventually, it's not there now, but Israel eventually will become more religiously zealous, and that zeal will become so dominant that Israel's going to say, look, we're not going to allow Arabs to worship on the Temple Mount area. We're going to take full control over the Temple Mount. The Temple Mount is controlled by Arabs right now. There's a strange situation there. It goes back to 1967. I won't get into that today, but the actual Temple Mount itself is controlled by Arabs. Israelis tolerate this to keep peace in the Middle East, but eventually that'll change, and you're going to see daily sacrifices taking place on the Temple Mount once again. So we watch Israeli politics, but right now the Israeli political scene has shifted more to the secular side, but I don't think that's going to last long, Willie. We're going to see it shift again over to the religious side. Then this creates an environment where they will eventually have the courage, shall we say, the religious right in Israel, and the prime minister, whoever he may be, who has their support to say, look, it's time we build an altar and let's start to sacrifice on the Temple Mount. It really, truly belongs to us anyway. That could be 2, 3, 4 years away. We don't know exactly. But the political situation in Israel is significant as far as prophecy is concerned because of this prophecy in Daniel chapter 12.
Mr. LeBlanc, next question. Who is Ibrahim Raisi?
Ibrahim Raisi, Willie, is the new president of Iran. Iran had elections here just recently. A lot of the world failed to take notice because the world has been focused on COVID still. The world is also focused on Israeli elections, which have now secured a new leader in Israel. You have very important elections coming up in Moldova, Willie, this tiny little country. Russia's very interested in what's going to take place in Moldova in early July. We're not going to be talking about that today. In a future broadcast, Willie, we will talk again about upcoming elections in Germany. Remember, on September the 26th, Germany's going to have a new chancellor, which is quite significant. But Iran has a new president, and Raisi is hardline. He is called the Butcher, because he's killed so many people in the past. He's been around for a while. We Americans haven't heard the name before, but he is now the president of Iran. That is a significant political position, and it means that Iran is going to continue to be hardline, vicious, very anti-Israel, very hostile toward Israel. So it's a dangerous scenario in the Middle East right now, Willie, because the Naphtali government in Israel, even though he is quote-unquote right-wing, he's considered to be weaker politically than Netanyahu was. Netanyahu was a strong leader, and the Iranians feared Netanyahu. They won't fear as much Naphtali. He's young, he's new, he is the head of this broad-based coalition, which is fragile. So the Iranians will take advantage of a weakened Israel, the weakened political state of Israel, and they're also already taking advantage of, and I don't mean any disrespect to the current president of the United States, but Iran believes that the United States under President Biden wants to return to some type of agreement regarding the so-called nuclear possibilities of Iran, something President Obama ushered in 2015, and they think Biden wants to get back to that. Bodes well for Iran. Iran's very happy with the way things are going. They're happy with the Biden presidency. They didn't like Trump because Trump was stronger, definitely more anti-Iranian. The Biden presidency is more willing to quote-unquote reason with and talk to Iran. The Iranians like this. Plus, they like the political instability that's continuing in the state of Israel.
Mr. LeBlanc, what are you reading now?
Okay, we were talking about Israel, and I am reading Jay Sekulou's book on Jerusalem. He's a famous lawyer here in America. He has his own radio program, and it's just a very interesting book, and he goes through some historical facts about this particular city called Jerusalem, which is the most important city in the world today. Jerusalem has a population, Willie, of over 1 million people. It's very dynamic, and so it gives me some insights as well. It's not a book, but I'm reading the latest edition of Foreign Affairs magazine, and it has a fascinating article on Vladimir Putin, Russia's weak strongman. So I read this regularly. It's has some good articles from time to time, and Russia is weak economically. It is strong politically because Vladimir Putin is a strong leader. He's to be feared, and he too will take advantage of what he considers to be a weak Washington under the Biden administration. It's just the way it is. I don't mean to be disrespectful to President Biden, but internationally, the enemies of America just consider him to be a weaker leader than President Trump.
Mr. LeBlanc, is there any booklets that you recommend to the viewers?
Yes, we were talking about Israel. Make sure to order toll-free this booklet, The Great Abomination, where we talk about the end-time city of Jerusalem, the abomination of desolation. We talk about a future sacrifice of animals on the Temple Mount. How does this prophecy in Matthew 24 and verse 15, the abomination of desolation shall be set up? This is a key prophecy. We talk all about it. You can phone us at that toll-free number, order this booklet. Phone us toll-free at 1-877-449-6753. It's a toll-free call. We'll send this to you free of charge. The number is 1-877-449-6753. As well, we have our summer edition of 40 Sins of America. We'll send that to you free of charge as well. That number is 1-877-449-6753, and we will have that telephone number as a link below the podcast. So make sure to phone for these free brochures. So, Willie, next time we're going to be talking about German elections. There's a lot of news regarding the upcoming German elections because now they're starting to debate politically. The Green Party and the present party of Angela Merkel. And this is a very significant development. We'll also talk a little bit about Moldova and the elections there coming up, I believe on July the 11th. All very important. So thank you for joining us. We continue to watch Israeli politics very, very closely as well. We're watching what is taking place in Iran. This is a very important nation. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.